Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on Monday. I was teaching a workshop this past weekend, so I've been talking for 16 hours straight over 2 days. Today, here's the address where you can get the soundtrack that we're going to do today. For all of those who are new, we use headphones at the end of this, where I will play a soundtrack, and I'll give that soundtrack away for free, and you can go to this address to find that. It lasts for 1 week, and then it's taken down to replaced by another soundtrack that I'll do for the next week. The purpose is to link everyone's brainwaves together with brain entrainment soundtrack, so we form a sort of scientific mind link using brain entrainment. The reason is there's powers of numbers, and when you get enough aligned conscious brain patterns precisely linked together, there's a possibility of shifting something in the quantum field. You know, essentially from the standpoint of quantum physics, all of reality as we know it is a construction generated by a consensus vote of a collective unconscious mind that's deciding what the next moment will be. And it's deciding that through a sort of a under the hood, before a thought, in the present moment, a sort of vision or expectation about what the world is going to look like. That expectation is something that's based on a belief system. Like, I believe that I've got this body, I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of stuff, and from a standpoint of quantum physics, none of this stuff, or me, has any objective reality. Its reality is only based on what I believe to be so. And therefore, if I can change my belief about what is so changes to conform to my belief. It's a co-creation of consciousness and the universe, where the universe and consciousness co-create one another. The idea in quantum physics that reality has no objective existence is, flies directly in the face of general science that has been around since, Newton. Most of physics that, governs the laws and the rules that we normally can expect that this world is made of, since Einstein came up with the theory of electromagnetism and won his Nobel Prize for that. He didn't win a Nobel Prize for relativity. Sort of amazingly, it was for his work on the electromagnetic effect, the fact that photons is something that exists, and the smallest measurable particle of light, quanta, the idea that light is a wave made of particles, and it will shift back and forth to have characteristics of looking like a wave or characteristics looking like it's made of particles, depending on your point of view. Whether someone is looking or not, whether consciousness is arrived on the scene or not, will change the wave to particle and back and forth. This concept of the particle nature, the sort of pixels on a computer screen, like right now. You're looking at me on a computer screen that looks like a person talking to you surrounded by stuff, but in reality, you know that it's an illusion. You know that it's just little colored pixels that are very, very tiny on your computer screen. 60 times a second are switching and changing in a sort of a movie of still pictures. 60 still picture scans per second is creating an illusion that I'm here, that it looks like a body, but it's really just little pixels on a screen. And from the standpoint of quantum physics, that's sort of reality itself. Reality itself is a hyperdimensional, a movie screen with pixels moving at a speed that is immeasurable and a point size that is so unimaginably small that it's not possible to see through it. It's down to the smallest particle measurement that can ever be made, called the Planck Length. It's so unimaginably small it's impossible to even conceive of it. But if that's the size of the pixels, and those pixels are continually moving at infinite speed, then it's impossible to see through this illusion. As deep as you want to dig with bigger and bigger atom smashers to smash particles apart to see what they're made of inside, and then those can be smashed and look inside, and those can be smashed and look inside, until you never reach the end of it. The end of it is nothing is solid, everything is a vibration forming a standing wave. And a vibrational standing wave is sound. And so when we go back to the original texts, the oldest texts on Earth are from India and China. As I mentioned many times before, the Vedas and the Sutras of Patanjali in Sanskrit, and the I Ching from China, this book, form the basis of conscious cosmology that has been around for 4,000 to 5,000 years, where all of the same discussions that we sort of see happening in quantum physics now, and the descriptions about the nature of reality, seem to suspiciously sound just like ancient philosophers talking about the nature of reality in these books. So when we look at some of these ancient texts, and we see these statements and the concepts of the yin yang, the Grand Yin Yang, everything is made of this concept of two things coming together, also described sort of in the early Vedic literature and Sanskrit, where they talk about, at a hypothetical time before time existed, when the universe was filled with nothing but a blissful experience of Godhood that extended infinitely and never had a beginning and never had an end. That shifted for some reason. Something shifted, and the infinite field became male and female at the moment of orgasm, birthing the world, the Grand Yin Yang, and therefore the mystery of the sexes, the mystery of the male and female, the mystery of the divinity of the orgasm, the bliss state made physical. And out of that bliss state becomes the birth of all things, the grand sacred mysteries, which is, where Tantra comes from, that sexual activity has a divine part, that everything that you can think of can be a doorway to realization about the true nature of reality. Here I've got, let me look here. Here is where you can go to make a comment or ask a question about anything that we cover in these live streams. And that covers about everything in the universe, right? That's scientificsounds.com/ask-a-question. And here is where you can go to see all the live streams I've done starting last year in April, 1 month after the world closed down with COVID. I sort of began this as reaching out to the community to help de-stress people, because everybody was getting hyper stressed about the fact that we're in a global pandemic and that people were losing their jobs and companies were closing down and everything was being closed. People were dying. Everyone's concerned. That extra stress pulls energy directly from the immune system. So your immune system is compromised when you're under a lot of stress. So the idea was to begin by, because I'm like, the stress meister. That's my job. What I do is brain entrainment, the use of sound for de-stressing the autonomic nervous system. I have sound healing techniques that do that. I have multiple soundtracks on the general market for that. So I figured, and I'm officially a public figure, so I thought I should be stepping forward and helping to de-stress humanity, to help bring the immune system back in the middle of a global pandemic. But that quickly evolved into what it is now, an idea that had been percolating in my mind for a few decades. And I had been unsuccessful in implementing in the context of other people's platforms, global meditations for world peace, and there's a number of those things that have gone on over the years, organized by large groups. And as a matter of fact, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi had come up with an actual mathematical formula based on the 100th monkey idea, where anthropologists had been studying these little monkeys on an island surrounded by other islands of monkeys, and they saw a monkey washing its sweet potato, washing the dirt off sweet potato before they ate it, and another monkey saw that monkey do it and started doing it themselves. Monkey see, monkey do. Pretty soon, more and more monkeys on this little island are washing their potatoes, until a critical quantum number of monkeys were washing potatoes and had the same idea. That idea now exploded and changed the quantum field itself, and all monkeys on all islands immediately and instantly were washing their potatoes, where they had no possibility of physical contact with the monkeys that were washing potatoes. Somehow it was communicated through the quantum field and made a change in reality itself. So that's essentially the idea here, is if we can get a number of people meditating together on the same idea, it's possible through the force of numbers to change reality itself in a quantum field. The difficulty is that you can get 20 people in a room sitting in a circle meditating together for world peace, but no two people are going to be going to the same meditative state. No two people are going to have the same idea what that might be. And so essentially it's kind of herding cats. It doesn't align close enough to get the job done. But if you approach it from a scientific standpoint, which is what this is all about, is trying to create a grand experiment with the quantum field, and using the latest technologies that we know about, with the use of sound and brain entrainment and headphones and binaural beats that create a phantom pulse that your brain entrains to, and have everyone listen to that at exactly the same time here at the end, which would scientifically align everybody's brain waves exactly the same, pretty much for the first time in history, to bring a precision to the people sitting in a circle meditating, where all their brainwaves go to exactly the same place. So now we're stacking the deck in our favor for a quantum response. We've got the possibility of using science to align consciousness together to make the kind of change that we see talked about all the time in news articles about the quantum field and the nature of consciousness interacting with the quantum field and changing reality itself. It's my feeling that that's what's behind something like a spontaneous remission, where all of a sudden a cancer, an inoperable cancer that's going to kill you, all of a sudden just disappears in thin air. And the medical system is scratching their heads and looking at the x-rays and thinking maybe we mislabeled the x-ray and this wasn't them all along. That's the most that the brain can stretch from a belief system of Newtonian physics, where reality has an objective reality, an objective existence, whether people are here or not. And as we see from quantum physicists around the world, that is no longer how physics looks at reality. A few years ago, the scientific community made two major statements. Number one, consciousness is a requirement for reality to exist. And that's quite a statement. That means that reality does not have an objective reality at all, an objective existence at all. You know, for instance, if there was no people any place in the whole universe, there would still be stars and nebulas and planets and rocks and all the rest of that. But from the standpoint of quantum physics, that answer is no. If nobody was here to witness it, there wouldn't be anything at all. There would be the potential for something to be, but potential doesn't pop into existence until consciousness arrives on the scene to become part of the mix. So that's pretty profound, and that aligns exactly with the Vedas and with the Sutras of Patanjali and what is being said in these 5,000-year-old texts from China. This idea of the fact that reality sort of creates itself, that consciousness can either be in a potential state or it can be in an actualizing state, depending on what consciousness decides it wants. Or as we saw from Terence Witt, where not only does reality have no objective existence, but it has no existence at all, where the only mathematical value that could explain eternity and infinity, which has no beginning and no end, is the concept of zero. Nothing. Nothing by definition has no beginning and it has no end because it's not here. So it's eternal by definition mathematically. And when we look at what Terence Witt was saying about that, where he's going, the concept of zero and an equal sign, and we have simple zero, which I'll put by an S, and infinitely complex zero. And in the infinitely complex zero category, we have every possible mathematical combination that could equal zero. Right? All mathematics, when divided or subtracted or multiplied or square rooted of zero, equals zero. Zero always equals zero no matter what the math formula is. So 0 plus 0 equals 0, 0 minus 0 equals 0, and all of those mathematical constructions in this column lends an infinitude of mathematical possibilities of relationships of zero to itself that always sum to zero. And the simple form of zero is just the void state that has all of the math in seed form but not expressed. So the seed of all mathematics is in the state of eternal nothingness. And then there is the infinite nothingness that has every mathematical possibility of zero to itself that sums to zero that you could imagine, stretching to infinity. And from the standpoint of Terence Witt, this relationship of zero to itself mathematically is the something that pops out of nothing. The relationships, the ratios of nothing to itself, is something. And all of that math is well recognized of what this is. This is all math. It's all information. We can describe the whole universe and everything in it in terms of mathematical formulas, which is essentially what physics is all about, and what quantum physics is all about. It's all math on a big blackboard. All of those fancy schmancy mathematical formulas that describe the nature of reality, those mathematical formulas themselves is the relation of zero to itself. That's what nothing looks like. Here it is. This is what nothing looks like on the infinite complex side of that equation. It does say something about what might be a description of what we call death, where the mathematics of the relationships of everything that makes me what I am collapse into seed form, and I pass through the equal sign to the other side of nothing. Simple nothing, where everything is in seed form. All of this is there, but it's not manifest. The idea is there in seed form, but this is the seed sprouted out and turned into something. Today we're talking about the grand sort of yin-yang. That is a relationship that I've talked about before between the electromagnetic universe that I learned in school, that everything is made of photons and light and the speed of light, and E equals mc squared, and matter equals energy at the speed of light times itself. It's one possibility is that in the next moment from now, I have an infinite number of choices, and one of those choices is going to be the one that pops into existence. Like right now, it's my next word, and you're hearing it. I'm here in a body, you're there in a body, and I'm saying things, and you're listening to those moment after moment after moment. This reproduces itself and continues forward because we all believe this is what reality looks like. But it's like a soap bubble. If you could get into the right place in yourself, down under the hood, before a thought, in the present moment, outside of time, you now stand at the precipice of the next moment. And that next moment is an open field of all possibilities, and you could populate it with anything you wish, but you have to be master of your wish. You have to be master of your expectation of what the next moment is going to be, and that requires you to be in a certain place in your consciousness. And that place in your consciousness is what people have been trying to explore and to get to since the beginning of time in every culture on the planet. And every culture on the planet has used sound as the primary tool used to bring you to that place. Sound traditions in every culture all have a sound tradition, and the sound tradition in every culture is an aid to self-awareness and expansion of consciousness. Healing is sort of the door prize, but every place you look, in every culture in history that's used sound, all of those are a spiritual tradition of sound. It's sound for spirit, it's sound for waking up. That's how we're attempting to use it here as well. The science of consciousness, the science of entrainment, the science of expansion of consciousness, of self-awareness. Now we have better tools. When the first monk walked out from behind some monastery with the first Tibetan bowl and rubbed that bowl, and it helped me go into this place faster and more efficiently. That was a high-tech tool, just like a computer to them. Now we can take that Tibetan bowl and I can plug a microphone into the back of an electronic keyboard and record that bowl and assign that bowl to middle C in a loop, and now the whole keyboard becomes a symphony of Tibetan bowls. We've just expanded our tools into realms that the first monk with the first Tibetan bowl could never imagine. I can put that bowl, that 6-inch bowl recording in a loop on middle C, and if I play C an octave lower, it slows the recording down by half speed, which sounds like a bowl that's twice the diameter. So a 6-inch bowl becomes a 12-inch bowl, another octave down becomes a 24-inch bowl, another octave down becomes a 4-foot diameter bowl, an 8-foot diameter bowl, a 16-foot diameter bowl. Only possible now to do that kind of thing. And the super high harmonics that usually you can't hear too well are being slowed down into a mid-range, into a low range, so all of a sudden you can hear them. And what does it sound like? It sounds like monks chanting. And what does the bowl itself sound like? It's starting to sound like the cosmic Om sound. From the standpoint of India, that's the original sound. Nada Brahma, the world is sound. In the Christian tradition, in the beginning was the Word. Word is vibrating vocal cords, it's sound. And as I've talked before in this series, when we talked about something called sonoluminescence, where you have a spherical container filled with fluid, filled with heavy water, with two transducers attached to it, and the frequency coming out of these two transducers is the frequency of the enclosure. So you take the sphere, and the diameter of that sphere is the tone coming out of the transducers. So the sound wave, pressure wave coming out, hits exactly in the center precisely and causes a bubble to form, which then collapses in something called cavitation. And when it does that, it creates light, creates photons, creates a sun. It creates a light that is so bright, it's as bright as the sun and as hot as the sun in a jar. They call it star in a jar, sonoluminescence. And it's expanding and collapsing and expanding and collapsing so rapidly that you can't see the flicker. It looks like a steady star in a jar. Light created from sound. And that means that the massive, gigantic, galaxy-wide gravity waves spreading through the universe, which also are sound, but strip the word away because it's not sound. Sound is only vibrations between 20 and 20,000 hertz. So if you strip the sound word away, you have pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency. And if that frequency is a wave that is bigger than a galaxy, we call those gravity waves, but it's sound. It's mechanical energy wave moving through the medium of consciousness itself, as it's described in the Vedas. So it's possible that everything that we see as the universe made of photons and the electromagnetic effect in Einstein's formula of E equals mc squared is an after effect of interactions of sound waves that are universally large, moving in extreme slow motion, hundreds of millions of years for these waves to move. Hundreds of millions of years from our standpoint, because it's all relative, but from the standpoint of a larger being whose body we might just be quantum particles in, business as usual. At the moment that I arrive at the present moment for now and have choices, and I make this choice, one school of thought is that at the next moment from now, all the infinite choices get chosen. That every moment I split into an infinite number of versions of myself and walk down every single possible corridor that there could be. And the universe expands into an infinite number of universe corridors, playing out every single one of those possibilities, moment after moment after moment. Each one of those infinite corridors, every single one of them, comes to a new moment and splits into a new infinite number of corridors times infinity. Every single infinity of corridors turned into new infinity of corridors, each and every one of them, moment by moment by moment by moment. And the universe expands. Expansion of consciousness, exploring every possible story there could be. the sort of infinite universe idea. Infinite number of possibilities each become manifest as consciousness explores every possible story there could be from an infinite number of standpoints. And all of it created where sound creates light. Light creates photons, creates electromagnetic effect, creates the universe that appears to be what we see around us. And once that electromagnetic universe has created something that looks like a body, if I blow wind across my vocal cords and make these sounds I'm making, those are sound waves issuing forth from light. So photons and light and the electromagnetic effect of what this appears to be is able to make mechanical energy waves and sound, but sound is what made this in the first place. So once again, we're back to the yin-yang, where sound creates light and light creates sound. They both feed on each other. Now, according to the ancient texts, sound came first. In the beginning was the word, Nada Brahma. The world is sound. Om. So from the standpoint of the ancient texts, they clearly state that pure energy arrived first as vibrational frequencies that interact with waves where they summate together. They create sonoluminescence and stars and nebulas, and where they phase cancel each other out, we have black holes, on, and we have infinite number of parallel universes, moment by moment by moment, arising out of this interaction of phonons and photons, where a photon is the smallest particle of light and the quantum particle of light, and a phonon is the smallest quantum particle of sound. Their interaction together forms this yin-yang thing, and what stands at the center that holds them together is consciousness itself. Consciousness is the key to it, and the split of yin-yang of consciousness is light and sound, eternally creating one another and forming everything that we see. I'm not the only person talking about this stuff. I mean, the world is chock full of all kinds of new explorations about the nature of consciousness and the nature of reality and the nature of time and space. And since the advent of the sort of amplification of the idea of phonons, and the recognition in science that sound is its own separate force in the universe, in the creation of everything, that there are sound waves and there's light waves. The electromagnetic spectrum does not include sound waves. Sound is a separate, unique force in the universe, aside from the electromagnetic force of photons. Sound waves, I believe, is more fundamental. The primary fundamental force that kicked the whole thing off and started this thing happening, where spirit and consciousness is what stands in between. There is something else that's part of this sort of illusion that we're in, where force always seems to spin. There always seems to be spin. For instance, if I'm in space and I throw a baseball, it's going to go forever. It'll continue flying in a vacuum with no resistance for eternity. The possibility of me to throwing that baseball and have it come out of my hand and be exactly and perfectly steady without tumbling, without having some spin to it, is infinitesimally small. So I'm sure someplace in the universe there is a rock someplace that is not rolling and tumbling as it moves through space at, 100 million miles an hour. But the lion's share of 99.99999% of everything is in a state of motion, rotation, and flux. So when we think of ourselves, here I'm sitting on planet Earth, plastered to my chair because I'm falling towards the center of the Earth in something called a point of falling that attracts the dust particles and the debris from solar explosions, and they all pack themselves around this point of falling until it forms a big giant rock that we're sitting on. And that rock is flying around the sun, which is another point of falling that's bigger. So now all of these planets and the sun itself is rotating around a huge black hole at the center of our galaxy. So everything's in motion, right? The Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. So here I am, part way up from the equator towards the North Pole. So my speed's probably about, 650 miles per hour sitting here in San Diego. I can't perceive it, but I'm moving that fast. The Earth is spinning. But aside from that, the Earth itself is moving. It's spinning and it's moving in its orbit around the sun. And that's a huge, I don't know, I have all those numbers on my head, but we know that that's hundreds of thousands of miles per hour. The Earth itself is moving as it spins. We got double torque now. I've got angular momentum. I'm sitting on this ball that's rotating around. That's angular momentum. That's right. Centrifugal force should be flying me right off the planet into outer space, and the only thing that's counteracting that is the point of falling, that I'm falling towards the center of the Earth. And so the Earth is going 150,000 miles an hour around the sun, and the sun itself is in motion too around the center of the galaxy, right? So now that's going a million miles an hour around the center of the galaxy. So now we've got me on the spinning Earth, which is in motion, and then that thing itself is in motion, and the galaxy itself is in motion. All of these angular momentums are stacking up and nesting together. So I'm in this amazing kind of spiral pattern of angular momentum. Angular momentum is a force of physics. We can measure what that means. That centrifugal force and centripetal force, something that wants to stop you and something that wants to throw you, off the planet, counterbalance each other. And we see similar activities at a quantum field inside every neuron of your brain cell. It's this angular momentum thing happening at the atomic level, right? So we've got cells are made of compounds, and compounds are made of atoms, and atoms are spinning. We have a nucleus with a proton and a neutron, and those are spinning around each other, and we have electrons in the three shells that are spinning around the nucleus, and the atoms are in a state of movement and spin in relation to each other in a compound. Everything is vibrating, and if you take the proton and you split it apart, it's made of smaller particles that are spinning. And those are made of smaller particles that are spinning. Everything is spinning and spinning and moving. And this motion of angular momentum is closely aligned with the momentum of consciousness itself. So consciousness itself is constantly in an angular momentum. It's moving. Consciousness is always moving from one place to another, one thought to another, one concept to another, one experience to another is motion. Somehow, this concept of these spiral angular momentum energy patterns, which is energy, and energy is sound. Angular momentum is sound, except strip the sound word away, because we don't have a good word for what it is when it's out of the 20 to 20,000 cycle range. But it's sound within that range, and it's not sound outside that range, but the underlying principle of what sound is based on, the vibration energy pattern moving through a medium, is what I'm talking about. So somehow the light photon universe and the sound phonon universe are held together through angular momentum motion, and consciousness itself is the glue that cements it all together. The exploration of quantum consciousness, finding the spirit in the fabric of space and time. The grand principle elucidated in the I Ching, where the core of all things is this, this yin-yang kind of thing, electromagnetism and sound, male and female, in and out, up and down, back and forth, all of the different concepts that you can think of that require polar opposites, which is essentially everything in the universe. The only thing that's outside of that is infinity, which has no opposite. So the opposites are an internal dance. That's the infinity. And what this equals, and also what it comes from, is consciousness itself in here. The only reason I can see is because of the limitation of my eyesight, right? I can only see that narrow little bandwidth of angstrom frequencies in the electromagnetic vibrational, chart. Narrow little bandwidth up here between 400 and 750 nanometers. That's what my eyeballs are tuned to. I can't see any of all the rest of it, which is 99.9% of everything else. I can't see it. This isn't tuned to that. So the only reason I can see anything at all is because I can't see the space around it. All the vibrational frequencies around my body that are invisible to my eyes are just as there as what this is. It's just I can't see those. So it appears to be a space around me. Same thing with hearing. The only reason I can hear is because of the limitation of my ears. My ears are tuned to 20 to 20,000 hertz, so I can't hear anything outside of that. That's 99.999% of everything. So it appears as if I can hear things because I can compare it with what I can't hear. And the same thing with thinking itself. My mind, thinking is only possible because I have definitions that require opposites. I can't have a concept without its anti-concept. I can't define something unless I can walk all the way around it. That means it has to be finite. That's why it's impossible to conceive of infinity, because you can't walk around it. You can't describe it from all angles. It's bigger than your mind can wrap itself around something. So if I can't define it by walking around it and seeing it from all angles, which you can't do with infinity, then you can't conceive of that. The brain isn't wired that way. The brain, it doesn't work that way. It works in sets of opposites. I can't know joy without its opposite. I can't know safety without fear. I can't know love without pain. It's like it's this eternal thing that has been going on forever and will continue to go on that way. But when we think about this idea of the yin yang, once again, this concept of the yin yang. Let me just draw this here. So here's the yin yang, and from the standpoint of the I Ching, each of these two halves of the yin yang is represented by a symbol. A solid line and a broken line. So the light force, or the positive and the negative, the male, the female, the light force is a solid line, and the quote dark force, which doesn't mean bad, is the broken line. The male is the solid line, the female is the broken line. The solid active force and the broken yielding force. And then the math begins to flow from there, where we have the possibility of doubling those lines and create what's called a diagram. which gives us 4 primal possibilities. So if this is a single line, then if we make these doubled, we have 4 diagrams, 4 possibilities, 4 mathematical possibilities. And then if we add a third line, we have a trigram. And in the trigram, we've got 8 possibilities. I'm going to draw those. So in trigrams, we've got 3 lines on one side and 3 lines on the other, and then 8 possibilities in between. A solid. Let's see if I can do this off the top of my head. You sort of see where I'm going with that. There's 8 altogether. And then if you align those together and double that, you have what's called a hexagram. You now have the 8 primary ones that can combine together and stack on top of each other and form a hexagram of 6 lines. And these original 8 turn into 64 hexagrams. And that's the 64 hexagrams in the Book of Changes, in the I Ching. And you can see how they're stacked together, that the 8 possible ways of the trigrams are lined up here and here in a grid, and where the 3 solid lines and the 3 solid lines are stacked on top of each other, that's the first hexagram. When you have 2 broken lines and a solid line on top of 3 solid lines, that's another hexagram, the 34th hexagram in this grid. Those represent the 64 states, the 64 places, the 64 conundrums, the 64 sort of situations in the school of hard knocks that we're here in. Here we are manifested as beings in order to learn lessons, in order to learn the nature of reality, to go down many paths. According to the I Ching, that's all mathematically set out from yin-yang, spins out mathematically into these 64 primary spirit situations that we are here to move through. And we are here to figure out how to move through 100% correctly, where all things, what they call the superior man, moves through every situation in the perfect possible solution to that problem, which generates no negative consequences, no karma, no nothing. You walk through each one. And how you do that, how do you know what to do? How do you know how to handle each one of these 64 conundrums that will eventually be presented to you? How do you know how to do that? That's what those 64 hexagrams are all about. They are the explanation of how you approach each situation in the correct way, as the, quote, superior man to move through, and not do it incorrectly and have to come back and redo that lesson again, over and over and over again, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, until you get it correct, until you figure it out. Supposedly I Ching is those 64 solutions to that problem, why it's so amazingly famous, why it's so revered, and the oldest text on the planet, all coming from this symbol. And now we've got, quantum coherent coupling between light and mechanical oscillator. A mechanical oscillator is sound, minus the sound word. Pure energy moving through a medium is a mechanical energy wave, pure energy moving through a medium. So we're talking about quantum coherent coupling between light and sound. So we have active scientific organizations who are doing deep research into aligning a coherence, a coupling between light and sound at a quantum level in order to create all kinds of new materials, and particularly towards quantum computers and things like that. Scientists produce a quantum state that is part light and part matter, part sound. Very amazing. Like down here, the interaction between light and matter, or sound, is central to life on Earth. It allows plants to convert sunlight into energy, and it allows us to see objects around us. Infrared light, with wavelengths much longer than that which we can see with our eyes, interacts with the vibrations of atoms in materials. For example, when an object is heated, the atoms that make up that object start vibrating faster, giving off more infrared radiation, enabling thermal imaging or night vision cameras. Conversely, the wavelengths of infrared radiation that are absorbed by materials depend on what kinds of atoms make up the materials and how they are arranged, so that chemists can use infrared absorption as a fingerprint to identify different chemicals. What we're talking about here is the interaction of light and sound at a quantum field level to create a new industry, and particularly quantum field industries and materials processing and quantum computers that are based on different principles than electricity running through circuits. We're talking about light running those circuits, and now we're talking about sound running those circuits instead. And this is an attempt to align a coupling between sound and light, which is even more efficient than that. So, one thing you can pretty much be sure is if human beings are exploring this, the universe has already done it. And it's done it eons ago, and all of nature is built on that kind of principle. Here we're talking about angular momentum that I was just mentioning. Orbital angular momentum mode division filtering for photon-phonon coupling. So there's this report here that is specifically mentioning what I was talking about before. The phonon-photon, the light and sound coupling, is intimately associated with spin, with angular momentum. The energy that is inherent in to make something spin and to keep it spinning, there has to be an energy source. And the energy source is consciousness itself. Consciousness is creating the original energy that drives the universe, as we see in quantum physics, right? Consciousness is a requirement for reality to exist. It's the driving energy force that forms the angular momentum of energy that couples light and sound together in the grand yin yang that forms everything in the universe, including my next thought, my next word, out of what appears to be a body in a continuum that looks like it's made of photons, but in reality, the photons are spinning from vibrational interactions from sound. On a universal scale, they call these gravity waves. In reality, this is sound waves minus the sound word. And these are, bigger than whole galaxy systems, right? You'll see all kinds of galaxies riding on these waves. They're so big. And they take hundreds of millions of years, and from our standpoint, slow motion, moving out. But slow motion is only relative to, our perceptual speed and our lifespan. From the lifespan of the universe, this is a certain vibration moving rapidly. And it's not just this one wave. This origin point here of this wave has an infinite number of points all over the universe in 3D. And this wave is not 2D, it's 3D. It's spheres moving out. And all those spheres are of all these points of origin are interacting with each other. And all these points of interaction are summating or phase canceling forming stars, forming sonoluminescence, forming black holes. And in miniature, inside of the proton of every atom in your body is a black hole, or these vibrational frequency patterns doing the same thing, infinitely small, all sort of a holographic fractal relationship to each other. Electron phonon systems, light and sound systems on a universal quantum computer scale. So whatever you think that you can create in a laboratory, nature already did it in the laboratory of the universe. That the universe itself is a quantum computer on a macro scale and a micro scale. And these experiments, I had a whole live stream on this business here, where sound waves have been found, the smallest quantum particle of a sound wave, which is the phonon, has been found to have mass. And not only that, but its negative mass and its movement creates gravity. That's why we're talking about these gravity waves. Where is it? Gravity waves have mass, but it's negative mass. And it's got gravity, but it's negative gravity. So it's the perfect counterforce in the yin-yang of where gravity is points of falling in the electromagnetic world, and in the sound world, the mechanical energy wave world, phonons have negative mass, so the two of those balance each other out. Sonic waves have mass. Bizarre source of negative gravity surrounds us, and this is all sound waves. Phonons indeed possess negative mass that generates the bizarre negative gravity field. Sound may have negative gravitational mass and could repel ordinary matter in the grand yin-yang of balance between the two big forces of reality, sound and light. This one is deep. Phonon-guided biology. Sound waves, the patterns of harmonics and overtones and octaves of sound waves, form the math of music theory. And as I've said before, everything in the universe is based on the math of music that we see in the piano back there. It's even the structure of the atoms in the periodic table are based on harmonics and overtone patterns. That's what the shells are that the electrons spin in. They're mathematical ratios, harmonics. You can look at the atom structures across the periodic table, and they march forward in clear mathematical expanded sequences that are all based on harmonics and overtones. So they predicted a couple of atoms before they were actually discovered. They knew exactly what they would look like. They just carried the mathematics of harmonics forward. Here they're talking about that. The architecture of life and conscious perception are mediated by toroidal coupling of phonons and photons and electromagnetic and electron information fluxes at discrete eigenfrequencies. Eigenfrequencies, by the way, is standing waves. So what this is saying is toroidal coupling is angular momentum. A toroid is like a donut that's rotating and creating a flux that moves in one side and spins out the other side. So a toroid is like a moving donut that its sides are rotating all the time and sucking energy in and pushing it out. A torus is what that's called. So that's some of the absolutely most complex mathematics that you can calculate is toroidal fields. And the place where toroidal fields are the most dense and most complex is inside the mathematics of a sphere. A sphere is the most complex mathematics in the universe. And a sphere tends to be the form that things assume in a weightless state. That's why the planet is round, it's a sphere. Cells are spheres. The atom cloud is a sphere. It's the most primal shape. A dome and a sphere are the perfect acoustic space because the angular momentum of the sound waves bouncing off these identical curved surfaces all focus themselves in the exact center. So that was the sphere project that I had all the way back in 1988 when I first moved to California. The place I established was called Brainwaves Sound Sphere Research. I was exploring the mathematics of sound waves reflected patterns in a sphere, because if it's tuned correctly, you end up with the possibility of creating a stable black hole, or sonoluminescence. That's where that comes from. So instead of a spherical container with two transducers interacting together, creating cavitation and the brightness of a star and the heat of a star, if the fluid inside is not just water, but it's deuterium, which has a chock full of atomic structure extra electrons, and it's not just two transducers, but every surface of that sphere all the way around is transducers, right? So that was the idea of the sphere project, a sphere made of speakers, that all of the spherical walls were all speakers. When you do that, it's 270 speakers in a 3-frequency geodesic sphere. A geodesic dome has got these triangles all arranged together that form 5 triangle patterns that form a dome. And if each one of those triangles has a triangle inside of it, that's a 2-frequency sphere. The ones on the playground are a single frequency sphere, which is big and angular with the triangles. But if each triangle has a triangle inside of it, it gets a little bit more round. That's a 2-frequency sphere. A 3-frequency sphere is every one of those triangles has a triangle in it, so it gets really rounded now. A 3-frequency sphere that goes all the way around, that's 280 triangles. And if each one of those was a custom-made triangular speaker, then you would have a complete connection of speakers, and all the sounds coming out of those speakers would now magnify the cavitation at the center instead of just 2 little transducers. These would be high-end transducers specifically designed to generate a sound whose wavelength is the radius of this circular enclosure filled with deuterium. That was my idea for a fusion reactor. But at the other hand, the level of pressure that could be brought to bear at the center of this would be far beyond what we see in these simple little sonoluminescence experiments with 2 transducers. This would be big time. This had the possibility of creating an opening in the time-dimensional continuum, and eventually opening up a black hole. And we're talking about doorways to other dimensions here. Kind of stuff that I probably was screwing around with in Atlantis and almost blew up the planet, right? We're all here to do it correctly this time, right? Anyway, the toroid here is nested together with sound frequencies in relation of harmonics, and that it's all the mathematics of harmonics theory, that the theory of music and frequencies rolling together. Sound waves are creating the toroidal spin. And that's the kind of thing we see in the neurons of our brain, which are, made of all these microtubules. And the microtubules are made of a crystalline structure. And crystalline structures have the piezoelectric effect. So that's where we have these microtubular networks in the nucleus of all our cells, including our neurons. And this matrix of microtubules that are crystalline structure that have the possibility of generating electrical pulses when you distort their cell membranes with sound waves is what this was I talked about before in a previous live stream. Phonon, single photon-phonon coupling at polar crystal surfaces is something that maximizes the piezoelectric effect in the microtubules in the axons of the neurons of your brain. So we have a neuron with an axon, and all of these lines here are microtubules, crystalline structures. Sound waves or pressure waves moving down the axons are what create the piezoelectric effect by distorting the cells that make up the axon and generate electrical pulses by the piezoelectric effect at the leading edge of the sound wave. Sound waves is what drives the brain, and the electromagnetic frequencies are the after effect. Nerve cells communicate with mechanical pulses, not electrical ones. And everything in your body is piezoelectric in some form. Liquid crystals, all of the fluid in your body, intracellular, extracellular fluid, microcrystals generate electrical pulses with sound waves. This massive crystalline structures of the scaffolding of everything in your body is set up this way, including inside the brain, inside the neurons, inside the axon connections. This magical thing that where consciousness holds this spin of the toroid between the angular momentum that connects the coupling of photons and phonons in the activity of neurons firing in your brain of your next thought. That's not even to mention that the pineal gland, which is a crystal, is doing something similar, generating electrical pulses by distorting the shape with the sound wave of a thought, generating infinite number of fields of interactions of these ripple patterns of pure energy that where they cross over create light, create sonoluminescence inside the nucleus of the cell of the neurons in your brain. The light is another thought you're having, or a realization that you might be having. And with that, we have our headphones. Today's soundtrack is this phonon-photon coupling idea, the spin of consciousness. So, here we go. here's where you can get that recording. Next week, I am teaching the second part of my workshop, so I'm teaching all day long for Saturday and Sunday. So this is going to move to Monday again. So in the meantime, take care of yourself and be healthy and happy, and I will see you next Monday.